All right, welcome to our final breakout session around trauma-informed care hosted by Center for Arts Inspired Learning. Again, my name is Emma Parker. I'm the Artistic Director, and today we're going to do our deep dive into addressing trauma through both virtual and in-person programming. I do encourage everybody to start thinking of either situations, concerns, questions that you may have that Leah and Alicia can address at the end of our session. Their expertise and knowledge in this field is vital to helping us understand our own work that we will hopefully be doing very soon, if not already doing with youth. I will record this session and send it out for you to later hopefully connect back with if there was anything you missed, and I will also send out these slides via PDF. But we're going to go ahead and get started. And so first I'm going to introduce Leah back with us from World Peace Teachings.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad you're back. I think the three of us last time just felt so inspired and excited to be learning with you and being with you virtually. And we're really glad that we have the opportunity to do this second follow-up. So I'm really glad you joined us today. It's also been really hard just because there's so much content and there's so much we want to share and learn with you that I wish we could do these breakouts like weekly from here until the start of school, but we can't. So today we're really trying to focus on some tangible takeaways and the most practical, applicable things that we can that are founded in research. So I'm so glad you're here. Just like last time, my little opening spiel is always to get comfortable because our brains can't access learning if we are not. If we are feeling anxious or worried or uncomfortable or we're too hot or too cold, it's really, really hard to focus and internalize new information. So get somewhere comfy, turn your video off if it's gonna make you stare at yourself the whole time like I do, and grab a drink or a snack and just kind of sit back and listen and take notes if that's helpful, and then you can go back and look at all this later. And I also just want to acknowledge that this might feel very much like drinking from a fire hose and like a lot of information in a really short time. And so I just want to say that and acknowledge it, and it's okay if it feels like a lot. And I think I can speak for Alicia and I, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we'd be happy to answer emails or questions after this, after you've had some time for your brain, which is going to feel so oversaturated, to just sit with this information and apply it to your day-to-day life. We'd be happy to contact and reach out. So don't feel like you have to have all the answers walking away today. So thank you for being here, and let's get started. So last time together, we looked at a trauma-sensitive lens when it comes to education and to learning and to virtual environments. So how do we adapt that lens to include remote teaching and learning? So in all the courses that I've taught in the past years have all been about in-person learning and talking about our trauma lens and how we view students and ourselves and our peers through an understanding of the impacts of trauma on brain development and learning. And what we need to do now is gain the ability to adapt that lens and do it virtually. So how do we do that? That's what we're going to look at here today. Reminder of the definition we're working with here together, which is that trauma is the overwhelming, uncontrollable experiences that psychologically impact victims by creating in them feelings of helplessness, vulnerability, loss of safety, and loss of control. So there's lots of definitions out there. People are talking about this buzzword differently. When I say trauma, this is what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a definitive list of here's the 10 things that are traumatizing. I'm talking about the experience people have regardless of the stimuli. I'm talking about that psychological impact of helplessness, loss of safety, loss of control, and vulnerability, regardless of what the actual experience was. We left last time together with this quote, which is from Bruce Perry. He's one of the foremost researchers on trauma-informed education. And he tells us that there is no more effective neurobiological intervention than a safe relationship. And we ended with this because I didn't want anyone to feel like trauma is a lost cause. It is not. statistically, almost all of us experience something adverse in our childhood. And although it can have lasting impacts on our brain development, on our behavior, on our relationship skills, it is not a death sentence. And so I don't want to take that ACE study that we looked at really briefly, where we see the correlation between ACEs, which are adverse childhood experiences, and these negative events future in life, as the end all be all, because through safe relationships, we have the opportunity to help students rebuild the synapses in their brain to help them learn safety and to learn those skills later in life. Our brains are incredible. Neuroplasticity, that ability for our brain to grow and change, is incredible. So we ended here that relationships are key. And so I wanted to start there together today and really talk about why and how. Thanks, Emma. So today we're looking at connection, and it's no surprise that experts on trauma-informed care are emphasizing the importance of connection during this time of physical distance. There are so many facets to education and to art, but at this time, if we're forced to prioritize one thing, I believe that it should be connecting with students and families. Schools and organizations are doing this in as many different ways as there are people. So there is no perfect or right way, as long as we're connecting and putting the effort into those relationships. The importance of connection is supported by research. So I included this in here just so you know I'm not making this up, because I love to sit and sing Kumbaya and hang out with people, and I just want everyone to be happy. Like, I know when I start talking about connection and friendship and relationship, it can feel kind of fluffy, but it is not. It is evidence-based, it's supported by research, and we see it. Harvey study from 1996, which I know is old, but it's been replicated time and time again, that strong community support can reduce the severity of trauma symptoms. That's huge. The fact that these symptoms of trauma, which can be not only life-threatening, but just they permeate our daily lives, the fact that we can reduce the severity simply by having a strong community and even one strong, safe relationship is incredible. And it should make us all feel like we truly can be the change that we hope to see in education and in the world. Quick reminder that schools, classrooms, studios, theaters, those are all communities for children. No matter what your specific context looks like, you are providing a community for children, whether it's just you and them one-on-one, small group, whole group, that's a community. And so you are doing that hard work of reducing the severity of trauma impacts. And I want to give you grace to give yourself that no one can do this alone. And we're not asking you to. We all have to take responsibility for all children, and we all have to share the load. So that means that we're not asking you solely to be the one that goes out and reduces those trauma impacts all by yourself. That would be unrealistic, and it would be too heavy a burden to bear. But when we all lift the load together, it can actually happen. And so that means share this with your colleagues. Share this with, if you are the classroom teacher, with the specialists, with the artists. If you are the artist or the specialist, share this load with the classroom teacher, with the administrators, with the community supports and the tutors, whoever else is supporting that child. And if you're not sure who, ask and find out who those other support people are, because the goal is to create a web. So we think about a child and he's standing on his own and there's just a pit underneath him. Our job as the adults is to create that web so that even if one support goes missing, the web is so tight that that child can't fall through. And that can't just be one of us. It's all of us together. So find out who else is in that child's web and get as close as possible to them so that that child can stand firm on that community. And I also just put this last reminder at the bottom that we'll never know all the kiddos who've experienced trauma. In fact, because of this pandemic, we can assume it's all children. So the point of trauma-informed care is not to create a special trauma class. It is not to segregate those kids and give them specialized treatment is to create safe communities for all kiddos where anyone can bring their experience and still be successful. One way to start this is by first being really flexible and sensitive to family needs right now. So start by asking how families prefer to stay in touch. What time of day is best for them? What frequency per week is best for them? Establish a structure for ongoing communication so that you can be reaching out on a regular basis in the way that the parent receives. And I know that that can be more work for us if some parents prefer email and others prefer text and others prefer phone calls and that one prefers a snail mail. I know that that creates more work for us, but it allows us to keep those doors of communication open in a really systematic way. Once you've determined the way that the family wants to be communicated with, this simple check-in can be really effective for finding out what's going on in that child's world. So send it home once a week, however that family prefers. Make it really easy for yourself by scheduling the send out, either by text or email or in the mail. You can just set a schedule in your Gmail that will push the email out for you. You don't even have to remember to do it, but it'll give you some really good information about what's going on in that kiddo's life. And as we know, educators and those of you that are working with kids on an ongoing basis, and when I say educator, I don't just mean classroom teacher. I mean in whatever way you are educating kids. So I use that term as a catch-all, but please don't feel excluded if you are not a teacher in the traditional sense. You are all educators. And so we know that educators are often the first ones to notice issues with kids, whether it's threatening their safety or something in their family. We tend to be the first ones to know. And that's been supported in recent months because we've seen the calls to 696 Kids decrease because of the lack of communication with parents. We know that abuse and neglect have not decreased in recent months with the increased time at home. Well, what has gone missing is that frequent and consistent contact with educators. That's why the number of calls has gone down. You are the first line of defense for so many kiddos who need that additional support. And so this little check-in, although it's very unassuming, it tends to open the door to really necessary and important conversations. One recommendation, because I know there's a ton of different organizations here, talk to your organization about having a point person who keeps staff up to date on local resources to follow up with parents in case food or housing or employment or crisis management teams are necessary, domestic violence shelters, health and mental supports. That's another one of those things that can feel like too much for us to keep track of all on our own. So talk to your organization. Hey, is there someone responsible for compiling a list of local resources that I can share with families? If not, can there be? Can we have an ongoing updated list of all of the resources in our neighborhood that we can connect kids with? That can be a really tangible way to help meet these needs without feeling the personal burden to do it all yourself. Make it organizational, share the burden by sharing the information among your staff. Feel free to steal this check-in, use it how you please, change the questions to better fit your needs. The important thing is to have an ongoing and regular check-in that parents will get used to seeing over and over, and that can help you to glean really important information about what's going on with kids. This just supports that regular contact is helpful. It helps schools or whatever your organization is play that critical role in that safety net. You can go ahead and move on. When we talk also about connection, I'm talking about 4 different categories. I'm talking about students' connection to themselves, student connection to their peers, student connection to adults, and student connection to the content itself. So we'll break these down just a little bit. A few things to consider when we're talking about students' connection to self. One of the impacts of trauma is that students develop a really negative self-esteem. They have a very low sense of self, and they struggle to love and accept and connect internally. and kind of create a barrier between that metacognition to think about thinking, to think about themselves, because it can be really challenging. So think about these questions in considering students' connection to self, because connecting with ourselves is critical for us to connect with others. And I know that sounds like some self-love mumbo jumbo, like you have to love yourself to love others, but it's also true. Like we need to be connected to ourselves to have positive relationships with others. So just in the back of your head or explicitly in your conversations with kids, consider these questions. How do they view themselves? Are they active or passive participants in whatever learning you're engaging in? Can you move your passive to active so that they are actively engaging in the content? And are they often the giver or receiver of support? We find that kiddos who've experienced trauma tend to be on the receiving end of a lot of support, which can end up creating learned helplessness and feelings of victimization, where we want to empower these students to not only receive the help they need when they do, but to also give support to others. Even if it's the smallest job you can think of, find opportunities for those kids to help others or even help you, whether it's finding something from your Zoom screen, like I can't find my glasses, and have them somewhere in the picture where they can help you find them. Whatever it is, can they help you grade papers? Can they help you set up if you're in person? How can we help those kids be givers of support and not always on the receiving end? Because that can really help to mitigate those feelings of helplessness by making them helpers. Next is considering connection to peers. So first off, are they connected to their peers? We can see some kiddos where they truly have no connection or engagement with their peers. We know that when they are willing to disrupt or hurt others and feel no inner moral compass of remorse. So we need to consider, are they connected, number one? If not, why not? And how can I help to support that connection? If they are, what topics of interest or conversation are you overhearing? If you let your kiddos chat on Zoom, if there's any free discussion time or structured turn-in talks, what comes up? Just kind of eavesdrop and figure out, what are they interested in? What are they talking about? How can I intentionally build opportunities to build conversation around those topics? And finally, if students are not connecting, what opportunities do we have to build rapport with one another? How can I engage them in team building, in relationship building with small tasks that ask students to open up to each other in really safe, small ways to start building those steps towards connection with their peers? And finally is connectedness to the adults. So that's connection to us as the grown-ups. And the things that kids are asking in order to feel connected to you are, do you see me? Do you like me? Will you help me learn? And will you keep me safe? And I have to just let you in a little secret here. There's 7 billion people on the planet and you aren't gonna like them all. And so you might not like them. And you don't have to say that out loud. I will say it for you, that there might be students or individuals you're working with that you don't like. And I free you from guilt about that. However, they can never know it because they are asking, do you like me? And they need to know that that answer is unequivocally yes. I see you. I am here for you. I'm here to help you learn, and I will keep you safe. Having those 4 questions answered in the affirmative is what will allow students to feel connected to you. In the bottom of this screen, if your like your videos of us are on the right-hand side of your screen, you might not be able to see it, but there are 5 letter A words to help you remember to connect with students. And those are acceptance, accepting them for who they are, attention, the brain thrives on nothing more than individualized attention. One comment of I noticed you, our brain holds on to that for 7 hours. We are riding that dopamine high for 7 hours from one single affirming statement. So what sort of one-on-one attention are we providing students? 3 is appreciation. 4 is affirmation. and 5 is affection. So just keep these A's in the back of your head and consider how you can be incorporating them into your remote or in-person interactions with kids. I provided some language, some connecting language, so that you have sentence stems to use. I personally will write these out on a Post-it note and stick them on my laptop where you can't see. I could have this posted right here and you couldn't see it. And it reminds me to use language that's connecting without students ever really noticing that's what I'm doing. So I see that you have observe without judgment. Use these sentence stems to help you do that. Feelings and needs. I'm wondering if you're feeling or you're needing. I'm guessing our friend is feeling. I imagine that it feels. Again, pull these out, put them somewhere that you can reference them until they become a natural part of your language. If they already are, that's incredible because you're modeling connected language for students. And if they're not, that's okay. This isn't typically how we speak in many cases. And so by adding these little scripts through Post-it notes, or reminders to yourself, we're changing our language, which helps to change our behavior in the future. There's solution making, engaging, and supporting. Go ahead and steal whatever you want from this slide. Thanks, Emma. A few other ways to cultivate connectedness are celebrating success and choice. Make big deals about the kids, especially the ones who give you the most grief, when they succeed, and they succeed in something every day. If they are present, they have succeeded in something. So find something to celebrate and make a big deal. Know the kid though. Some don't want a big deal in front of their peers. That could be really embarrassing. So find out how they like to be celebrated. It might be just a little nonverbal note that you hold up on the screen. It might be a chat that you send. It might be a note to the parent. It might be a big deal in front of everybody. But know the kiddo and then celebrate them in the way that makes them feel celebrated. Put power in the positive, which means for every negative or redirection you have to give a child, give them 5 positives. For your really challenging kids, make the ratio 10-1. Put the power in the positive and their behavior will follow. It might take time, but it will. Kindness walls where you have students shout at each other and then you can display them behind you or pull it up on the screen to say, here's what everybody has noticed each other doing with kindness over the past week. Use humor, drive-bys, or where you just really quickly notice somebody like, Emma, I love the way you're helping me with my slides. Thank you so much. And then you go right back to whatever you were teaching about. Really quickly, no big deal, but that student holds on to it. And this last one, the quote at the bottom, is helpful when you have to do something that the student doesn't want to do. It's not their favorite part of the day. For my daughter, it could be doing the dishes. My expectation that she does the dishes is not going to change. That is the expectation in this household, is that we all help and support. But before we do the dishes, because I know you don't want to, would you like a high five, a handshake, or a hug? Now, the ones for my daughter might be a little bit more unique to her, but give something to say, I know this is going to be hard. We're still going to do it. But before we do, how can I support you? If this is virtual, you can change that to say, before we move on to math, would you like a thumbs up, a smile, or a silly dance from Miss Howe? You can pick. We're going to do the math, but before we do, how can I help support you? And then the next slide, we're going to talk just a little bit about social and emotional development, because in order to have strong relationships, we've got to have strong social and emotional skills. And I'm going to move quickly through them because we have such a short time today, but I'm going to leave these here for you to refer to later. These are ways that you can help students begin to develop their social and emotional skills. This slide has ways that you can support them. Number one, help them notice bodily sensations. When they're angry, ask them, where do you feel that feeling? Is it in your fists? Are they gripped really tight? Is it in your belly? Does it feel like there's something churning or spinning in there? Do you feel it in your chest, like you're just gonna explode? Do you feel it behind your eyebrows or right in the middle? Where do you feel that feeling? Help them become aware of their body connection to emotion. Have an emotional vocabulary. I have a tool here, a few slides down about this. Give words to feelings. Happy, mad, sad is all we hear from so many kiddos who don't have strong social and emotional skills. Happy, sad, mad. Happy, sad, mad. We do it as adults. I feel frustrated, and that's the only word we have when we're working with students about our feeling. Let's expand that vocabulary. What is at the root of the emotion we're feeling? Let's give words to that. Help students to cope with their arousal level. So by arousal, that means if our emotions are on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being complete calm and peace, 10 being a complete mental breakdown where we're kicking and throwing and screaming and shutting down entirely, at each between 1 and 10, what do we do at each step? Are we aware of where we're at on that scale? How do we manage? Do we step out? Do we speak? Do we have coping mechanisms? How do we support kids in their ability to recognize and cope with each step on that arousal scale? The second to last one from the bottom is about empathy and noticing emotional cues in others. Trauma helps, or trauma negates our ability to do that. It makes it, especially for a child who's experienced significant trauma in their childhood, their ability to read emotions and empathy and others' feelings becomes really challenging. So how do we make that explicit? When I see your eyebrows touch, it looks like you're angry. Or when you see our friend's tears, she likely feels sad. It might sound really juvenile, but even our high schoolers sometimes need those reminders of how we recognize emotional cues in others. And so again, go ahead and read this and ask me questions about it later, about specifics, but I didn't want you to not have it. And then this is, you can give this to students. Again, it's helping to support their own internal social skills. And you can ask them these questions to develop self-awareness. So if they're doing, especially if they're engaging in an undesirable behavior, helping them to answer these questions about what is it you want right now? What am I doing? And what am I getting? And that can seem, again, really trite, but what am I doing? Well, I'm shouting out. Well, what do I want? I want to be heard. Well, what am I getting? I'm disrupting the entire learning environment, and maybe I am getting heard. So this shouting out is really working for me. So I need to learn a more appropriate skill to meet that need, because it's not okay to talk over others, or whatever the case may be. Again, with self-regulation, same one down. When my body and my behavior is not regulated, I'm dysregulated, what is my intent? What am I trying to get? And how do I choose a behavior that helps me to reach that goal? Empathy and social skills. Again, here are some questions that we can be thinking ourselves about kids and also asking them to articulate back depending on where they are developmentally. This next slide is that tool that I mentioned. I can send it to you, or I can give it to Emma to send to you as a PDF if you'd like it. It's available online. I think it's called the Feelings Wheel. I love this for kids because that happy, sad, mad that we see in the middle, there are so many other feelings that are connected to that word. If I'm mad or angry, look at the root causes as you go out that wheel. Is my anger coming from feeling humiliated? Is my anger coming from feeling distant from others? And then even farther out on the wheel, is my anger truly resentment, or is it stemming from a feeling of disrespect? Or did I feel ridiculed? Am I feeling jealous and it's coming out as angry? So this can be really helpful to giving language to feelings, because so often we don't have it. Mad, sad, angry, or mad, sad, happy is all we use. So here are some ways to help students say, I'm feeling insignificant right now, or I feel overwhelmed by what's going on. It's coming out as angry, but at the root of it is I'm incredibly overwhelmed. How do we help them? We give them the words. We allow them to pick words. We give them age-appropriate choices to pick from. And here's just a whole bunch that you can use with any age level. I also wanted to provide you with 3 in-person or virtually appropriate breathing breaks or brain breaks. First is star breathing. You'll have everybody stand up. You'll have them reach their finger out and they'll trace the star, and you'll go on the up, you breathe in. When you reach the apex or the point, you hold and you count 3 seconds for them, and then you trace down and you exhale. So it's in, hold, exhale, and you go all the way around the star. You can do this whole group as a brain break, Or for that one kid that you're helping to identify his arousal level when it's really high, you give him this as a tool to use to come back to a more calm place. The next one is a figure 8. Same, you stand, you reach your arm out. Now this one is great because use both arms. So if you want to do it right now, just stand up. Nobody can see you. Stand up, point your dominant hand out, and trace the figure 8 while breathing in. Ready? Pause at the middle. Now trace it again, breathing out. Do this as many times as it takes to regulate your breathing. Now switch to your non-dominant hand, and you'll do it again with all your kids. Breathe in with your non-dominant, exhale with your non-dominant. Now for the fun part, cross, you can't see my legs, but cross your right leg over your left, or stand on one foot. Put your arm out and trace the figure 8. I'm standing on one foot. It's challenging my balance. Anytime a human's balance is challenged, our emotions become in check because we are falling in or out of balance. So when we ask students to either cross their legs or to stand on one, if they are feeling some really intense emotions, this can help bring them back to a place where they can engage. So pause, do the figure 8, do it on one leg, then do it on the other. Do it with one hand and then with the other, as many times as you need. Challenging balance can be a great way to de-escalate students. And this final one is triangle breathing. Again, very simple, stand, point, get kinesthetic involvement. We want kids crossing the midline. So when they're chasing this triangle, have them cross as big as they can with this triangle. This isn't some little, no, we want to cross the midline both ways. We can also send this home for students. If parents have printers, they can print it. If they don't, we can mail it. We can send everybody this in a poster size, and they can hang it on their wall, and we can all do it together as part of starting or ending or breaking in class. These are just 3, but there's many more. You can do it with a square, with any shape. Make it creative, make your own, or use mine. I included these next slides. I'm not going to talk through them, but they are a self-assessment. These are from CASEL. So there's social and emotional learning. It's a self-assessment. So you can go through these. The first slide is whole group. The second slide is small group. The third is independent. And you can go through these, and these questions will help you identify if your lessons, remote or in person or blended, are supporting social and emotional learning. It's a self-assessment. Nobody has to know it. Feel free to share it with your colleagues, or just for your own professional practice. Go through, do a self-assessment, see how you're doing in incorporating social and emotional learning. These last 2, I'm gonna save for the end. If we have questions about, well, what do I do when? We'll come back and look at these slides. But if we don't have time for questions, I wanted you to have these to say, well, what do I do when a student is exhibiting certain behaviors, and have some strategies. So we'll talk through them if there's questions or we have time. But if not, you've got some examples here of what you can do when these very real situations occur in our classrooms. You can skip right through these, Emma, and we'll come back if we need to. And that's it from me. So thank you for bearing with us together today and for being here. And I'm passing it off to Alicia.
Hey everybody, it's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. My name is Alicia Ruby. I am the Executive Director and founder of In Harmony Therapeutic Services. I want to make sure that we have enough time for questions at the end. So I am going to go through this relatively quickly. So just like Leah said at the beginning, it's going to feel like you're drinking from a fire hose. You'll have this information. You can always connect with me after the fact, but we're gonna get through it. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is just talk about what was discussed last time. So we talked about the impact of trauma on children, and what I talked about was that I was going to focus on last time 2 things: how we can as artists focus, help foster positive relationships, and also help improve the learning process. And so then I talked about 4 tools for practice: planning, connectedness, structure, and communication, and how we can use those and interweave them into our practice and into our programs so that we can become more trauma informed. Today, next slide please, Emma, I want to first manage expectations. We're going to be identifying some strategies that you can use to build community in your program. Leah just talked about, that relationships and connection and community are really key to mitigating the felt effects of trauma. So we're going to be identifying some strategies, both in person and virtually, for that. But what I think is even more important is that you all develop some strategies to start thinking critically for yourself about how you can make individual decisions to make your programming more trauma informed. As I said a couple weeks ago, I do not have all of the answers. There is not a prescription I can write for you. There is not a template I can give you. There is no one size fits all answer to these questions. But my goal is to provide you with some examples that I use and kind of walk you through my thought process so that you can start thinking about, well, how would I think about this situation for my programming? And then hopefully we'll have some time for individual questions at the end so we can even walk through this a little bit more. Okay, next slide. So when we're talking about this idea of building community, one of the ways that we can do this is by developing a group culture. And like Leah talked about, it's you with one kiddo is going to be a community. You with a small group or a large group is a community. The school is a community. So how are we going to do that? So one of the ways that we can do that is through group routines and predictability. So that this creates a felt sense of safety and can reduce anxiety around unfamiliarness or the unknown. If we know going into a group, if we know going into something that there are a set of routines that are predictable, that grounds me. That lets me know that there's something that I know what's coming. And then it can also contribute to a sense of group culture and norms. Okay, so speaking of the group norms, this again creates this sense of safety. I know what to expect in this environment. Norms should support and empower children, and it should foster a sense of community and group culture. When we're talking about group culture, we're talking about one of accountability in a we're accountable for each other and to each other sense. That we have a culture of safety, that we have a culture of empowerment, and that we have a culture of support for everyone. That means including you as the group facilitator. Group culture is born of norms, predictability, consistency, relationship, okay, among others. Next slide, please. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into each of these 3. I'm going to use an example that I use in my programming, okay? Again, this is not a be-all, end-all. This is not even something that you have to adapt for your programming because it might not work for your programming. But I want you to get a sense of the thought process behind these things. My hope is I'm going to do an in-person example and then talk about what that would look like virtually as well. So we're looking at routines and predictability. So we already said that it creates a felt sense of safety and reduces anxiety. So one of the ways that I have thought about this for my programming is with regards to an entrance ritual. So how this looks like in person, I have noticed that when the children transition into my programming, they are often heightened. They're either coming from recess or coming from lunch, which tend to be escalating, heightening activities for children. And they need a minute to just stop and reset before going into the program. So what this looks like is before the children come to me, I get there early and I set up the space and intentionally think about how I'm going to set up this space. So frequently the lights will be off. There's like ambient lighting, so it's not dark, but the lights are off. There's calming music being played. There are chairs already set up in a circle, so nobody has to get their own seats. I have name tags for each child that's Velcroed with little sticky Velcro things on the back of the chair, so children don't have to wonder where they're sitting and who they're going to sit by. And then I stand at the doorway with my clipboard for attendance, and I call their names one at a time. And this is when Leah was talking about this idea of like relationships and language and noticing, right? Hi, how are you? Sometimes that's an open-ended question. So you might say, I'm noticing that you have a smile on your face. What good happened? What was something good that happened today? Or I'm noticing that your brow is furrowed, that your face kind of looks like this, and you can even model their face for them. Like your face kind of looks, you have a furrow on your brow. That tells me that you might be feeling angry. How can I help? What do you need from me right now? Asking those questions. We talk for about 30 seconds, and then I have a mantra that's posted outside of the door. And it's, we are worthy phrases. So they can say, I am worthy of respect, community, joy, justice, work. There's 2 more that I cannot think of for the life of me right now. But the child would say, I am worthy of joy. And then I look them in the eye and say, you are worthy of joy. I'm so glad you're here. You can go ahead and go in. So that creates a felt sense of safety, of calm. It sounds like I'm understanding them. There's a lot of waiting involved, which is like the downside of that. And I've thought through how to make that better. I wish I had like a team member that could be engaging the children that were waiting while I was doing this, but alas. And when I come in, right, it looks calm. So how would I switch this up for virtual? The goals remain the same, right? We want to engage the children. We want to build relationships. We want to mitigate any heightened transitions. So, when they come in, some things that I might think about, am I going to already be in my chair? Probably. The first thing that they should see when they come on screen is me. Are the lights in my space going to be dimmed? Am I going to have calm music playing? Sound on Zoom is weird. I'm working on that currently. Is everybody muted? Is there a time for the children to talk to each other? Those are things that you kind of have to figure out for each one of your group. If I'm engaging in this check-in, some of those questions like, what happened that you're feeling upset today? Those can be some intimate questions for children over a virtual platform. So maybe, how am I going to handle that? Maybe I have instead a set of 10 questions that are already written out, and we make it a game. Each child picks a number between 1 to 10, and then they get the whatever question that is. What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite color? What's your favorite sport? Or we have questions that we've like discussed and developed as a group, and the children ask each other, and they go around and pick and ask each other these predetermined questions. All ways to set your program up for success right from the very beginning. Okay, the next one. We're going to talk a little bit about expectations and group norms. Expectations is not, it has a negative connotation, but it's not negative. It's just, we all have expectations. We have expectations in our group of friends. We have expectations in our families. It's just, what is the group norm? We know that group norms can create a felt sense of safety. We know that group norms should support children. When we're talking about expectations can be really helpful so that children know what to expect. But they can also be hurtful. So any expectation that would create a barrier for children to learn or engage would be hurtful. And so you have to think through that. Some things, because I know I'm going to get asked this question, what would be an example? Are you expecting in your virtual program children to have their hoods off? I don't know. I know that that's a school rule. Something that I consider for my programming is when we're talking about children who've experienced trauma and we think about human beings, comforting things tend to be a swaddle. What's comforting to a baby, right? Sucking and swaddling. So how does that look to a third grader? Well, they may pull their hood over their head and tuck their arms in their sleeves. I know that when I notice children becoming more anxious, one of the first things that I see is that their arms go into their sleeves, and it's almost like a swaddle. Gum chewing or sucking on a shirt, that's something that also tends to happen. So is that an expectation that needs to be had for virtual programming? I don't know. I don't necessarily have the answer, but it's something that you might want to think about. So we want to empower children to be responsible for the expectations and for the group norms for themselves and for each other. So how do we do that? We can make creating expectations a group activity. And this is what I think about in my programming. What do the children view as important? Typically, I try to keep it, because you can kind of go off the rails. I try to keep it to like between 3 and 5 things. We know from science that our brain processes numbers best in groups of 3. And expectations in my groups typically center around we are safe, we are respectful, and we are helpful. Okay, so if they're centered around that, and we're working with the children, what do the children view as important? And then how are we going to present those expectations creatively? So Leo was talking about those breathing exercises that were kinesthetic in nature. So a lot of times for my expectations, I think through, okay, how do I want to present this in a way that's really going to be internalized? So I want to present it orally and kinesthetically. And in my program, that would look like we use body percussion to go over our expectations. So that might look like this. We are safe. We are respectful. We are helpful. But in addition, they repeat it. So it would sound like this. We are safe. We are respectful. We are helpful. We are helpful. They internalize that a lot better. So how are you going to do that for your program? I review them weekly. It becomes a ritual, something that happens every time. We review the expectations, and then we think through consequences. Consequences are not necessarily bad. There are positive and negative consequences to everything we do, okay? So when I'm looking at expectations, typically I do this visually. We visually represent the expectations, and then we visually say, what does it look like if everybody's following the group plan? What does it, again, going back to that, what does it sound like? What does it feel like? What does it look like? What happens? What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? What are the consequences if the group plan isn't being followed? And we write that out or picture that out or visually represent that out too. So in the end, you have this expectations, good consequences, not so good consequences. And then I think about this so that we can hold each other accountable. We make it a contract in my programs. So each child signs it, I sign it, and that this is our group contract, our group plan, our group norms. I would do this with just a little bit of nuance the same way virtually. So thinking through what's the goal? The goal is to have clear, consistent, concise expectations. So I would have the discussion. We would create them together. I would probably have to do all of the writing. I would have to think through how I would get it signed. Maybe each child picks, like you have those little hello, my name is stickers, and each child picks the color and I write their name on the little sticker and stick it on the visual representation. That's one way that I would do that virtually. Okay, last thing, group culture. We talked about last time, my favorite chart ever, this idea of when we are in the optimal space, we're in a restorative space, meaning that we have high expectations and high support, that we are cooperating, collaborating, taking responsibility, and being accountable. This is the culture that we want to create. Okay. Is this restorative culture? And this is a culture for you as well. So how I think about this, and Emma, you can go to the next slide, is how would this look? How would this sound? How would this feel in person? What does this restorative culture, again, cooperating, collaborating, being accountable, being responsible, what does that look like in person? How are you going to do it? What rituals, what things that are going to contribute to predictability? What norms are you going to put in place to get there? And then what are you going to do when the group plan isn't being followed and the culture starts potentially devolving? What are the things that you're going to have to think about? So some of that might be like virtually, because we have to keep everybody safe, right? And that that's going to look different virtually. That's going to be an emotional safety. So if a child starts having issues with another child and there's name calling, are you going to mute the child? If you unmute the child and it continues, are you going to potentially kick the child off the call? I don't know, because that could also harm the relationship with the child. Are you going to have a one-on-one meeting with the child? Are you going to have to talk to the child's parents? What does that look like? If for you, does that child need something from you to keep them from getting to that point? What does that look like? So you can create group culture virtually, but you have to think about it intentionally, and you have to know what you will do so that if something's not working, you can be flexible and make a change. Okay, on the next slide, I've included some resources. We've been talking about restorative and restorative justice, and we could do a whole seminar on it. So here's some resources for you. There's restorative justice is born from the criminal justice system. There is the first link will take you to a tutorial that is a very, very good overview of what restorative justice is as it relates to the criminal justice system. And then below it is a restorative justice overview for schools that has wealth of information embedded into that resource. And then I found a resource yesterday that was very timely, 4 core priorities for trauma-informed distance learning. It was so great. And it talks about connection and flexibility and predictability, and it was just wonderful. So there's that as well. Another thing that I thought would be helpful is to give you some social media accounts to take a look at and to perhaps follow. This is ongoing work. It's about the process, not the product. And you can read articles, and that's wonderful. Read the articles, read the books, do the thing. But if you're not constantly thinking about it, it might get pushed to the side. So there's some Instagram people, there's some Facebook people that when they pop up as you're scrolling, you'll be like, oh, that's a good idea for my programming. Maybe this is something that I can take a look at. So take a look at these people, see who they're sharing from, and follow those people as well. Remember, it's the process, not the product. It's a journey, a destination, all of the things. And you're not in it alone. Like Leah said at the beginning, we're all creating this web together. Okay, I gotta breathe. It was a lot of information in a very short amount of time. Again, thanks to Cal, thanks to Leah. Now we can answer some questions, I think, right, Emma? Emma, you're muted.
Sorry, thanks. I was saying if you would like to come on screen, you're welcome to. This is the time that we can hopefully answer some specific questions, concerns you've had, situations you've been in with your participants in your programs or in your schools that relates to this specific work, especially when that comes to the unknown, which is next year. We don't know if we're going to be in person, virtual, or a blended. So how can you transfer that culture that you set in person that then all of a sudden you have to do virtually come 2 weeks from that? So this is really the time for you. For questions, you can put them in the chat box. You can unmute or get on screen. I'm gonna give the option for everybody to unmute, or you can use the little hand raise. Maybe. Can I? There you go. Okay. So you now have the option to unmute yourself if anyone has specifics.
Ryan, can you explain why crossing the midline is important to kids?
Leah, you're muted, Leah. You gotta unmute.
Leah, I'm sorry.
Sorry. So our bodies reflect our brains. And so because our brains have two halves, when we cross our midline, we help to reconnect both parts of our brain. And we actually see some kiddos who struggle to cross midline. Like this is way down the road if you're ever doing like functional behavior assessments or you're looking at, if you're like observing a student. Some kids who they will physically, like if I need my glasses, like what I just did, I pick them up and their hands will meet at midline and then take them to the other hand instead of just crossing over. And that can indicate that there's some sort of challenge in using both parts of the brain simultaneously. And so by crossing midline, we actually help to physically connect those two hemispheres.
Thank you.
And on like a less like neurobiological perspective, it's also, again, that throwing off of balance, and that kinesthetic movement is also just generally good regardless of our brain hemispheres.
There's also a lot of studies about like midline crossing, but also like core distal. So like learning from going within to the outwards and vice versa, from the outward to the in, and seeing how students can do that kinesthetically can also make better connections cognitively.
Okay, I have a question. What are some of the triggers that I might encounter in virtual teaching? I teach visual arts, so and at the high school, secondary level and above. But I'm just curious, what are some things just in the structure of the virtual or what we're going to have to deal with, the technology or whatever, that may cause triggers with my students? I'm going to go mute on now.
Yeah, Alan, if I can just speak to this for a second, and then I'm sure Alicia has ideas too. One thing that kiddos who've experienced trauma sometimes have is called hypervigilance. They become hyper aware of everything around them, and it makes it really hard to focus on one thing. And I feel like in the virtual world, that is doubled and tripled because we have the screen, and then we also have all the stimuli around us. And that can be really triggering because we are now, if we've experienced trauma or if we are in a highly escalated state, it is our brain's ability to keep us safe by being aware of everything around us. And that is like biological because we had to be aware when we were cavemen of the bear or whatever. And it kept us safe. Now, especially in kiddos who have had chronic trauma, they can't tune out anything. So while you and I are sitting here, and in my background, I hear my AC running, I hear my husband and my baby in the other room, I am tuning that out and focusing on you. If I was in a highly escalated state or had experienced chronic trauma in recent years, I wouldn't be able to tune that out. So how can we help kiddos tune things out? Now, this is not, you asked for triggers. This is not a specific one. You could consider things like abrupt loud noises, abrupt changes in physical stimuli, the necessity to change our visual pathways. So from looking at our screen to looking down to looking back up can be really, really challenging. So the more we can keep on one horizontal platform in the classroom, we do this by telling teachers to keep all of their visual aids on the same horizon versus having kids have to look up at this and then over at this and then down at this. That changing a visual pathway can be hard. So just thinking about that hypervigilance, if I'm hyper aware, you as the teacher think ahead of time what could be distracting and be taking kids' attention, and then how can I help them to focus? So maybe they, Alicia, I don't know if you know about the teacher's Zoom better than I do, but can you mute everybody else so they can't see their peers? Can you mute everybody else's sounds so they're not hearing anything going on in the background? Can we give them, does your school have access to noise canceling headphones and they can focus on just visual stimuli? Those sorts of things. So how do we cut down on those distractions? You're muted, Alicia.
I did the thing. Specifically, I mean, we're looking at, we don't know, you know, what challenges children might be coming to our programming with generally, but some things that I just wrote down. Sleep patterns that might be disrupted because they might not be going to bed at the same time or waking up at the same time. I know that my son's bedtime has gotten progressively later in the course of this stay-at-home thing because it's just what's happening. There may be a feeling, like Leah was just saying, a feeling exposed because now we're in their home and we can see what's going on in their home. They might be triggered by this loss of routine, right? Their school day is broken up. They have to like log on. There might be technology issues. We know that there's, you know, incredible inequity in terms of the technology. One of the things that I found because I'm a musician, is the sound issues are really profound in virtual programming, and it is not ideal. When we like do instrument and music making, I mute everybody so that really the kids are only hearing their instrument and like my guitar. But they're still getting to play their own instrument. Blue light can cause headaches if you're staring at a screen all day. I have blue light. So does Leah. We have our blue light glasses to help ourselves not get headaches. Those are just, I mean, that was 30 seconds of me thinking of some triggers.
And I'm also going to answer your question by not answering it. I can take her, it's okay. Because we can't know everybody's trauma and we also can't know everybody's triggers, you can do a survey and ask, and they might not know, but you can put it out there to say, are there certain words or phrases or images or sounds that cause you to feel anxiety, that cause your heartbeat to get quick, that cause your breathing to increase? And if so, what are they? And that's good for both virtual and in-person. If they don't know, depending on the age of your kids, it might come out as time goes on if there's like a loud, like a high pitched noise or whatever it is. But asking them, and some kids might say, oh, when a book drops on the floor really loud, I get really anxious, or whatever it is. So asking can also just be really helpful.
And to go to the chat, to finish up with Alan's question, he also asked about earbuds for high school students. I think I allow them, even when we were in person, if they needed to tune something out and focus, I allowed that in person. So I don't see why via Zoom, as long as they can stay focused on your program and they're not also playing music through their headphones and listening to you, and you make that expectation known, they're completely useful, especially if they're at home. There are other, you know, their siblings or mom or dad are working on a separate computer. One thing that wasn't also not mentioned is time and expectations can be triggers. To me, if you have too high or too low expectations, it can trigger some anxiety or the unknown. And a lot of our youth are sharing computers, cell phones, and if we go over or under in our time, or it's not set within that routine, that can also cause triggers because someone else is standing there waiting for them to jump on, or they're saying things to them that we might be able to hear because they have those earbuds on. It is also causing anxiety. And if we're saying, oh, just give us 5 more minutes because we're almost done with the lesson, that can cause that routine to become a trigger, or the lack of routine to become a trigger for them as well.
The other thing that I had in my notes and forgot to mention is that expectations should be age appropriate.
Yes. Yeah. Because I just mentioned time, it is 4:05. There was one question, comment about how global this is going to be. So how can we support parents, families, teachers, in addition to the kids? And I'm going to throw this out there for that, like whole child learning and whole child support, so that web is even thicker is probably where I would take this. But kind of, do either of you have tips or tools for how we can reach others that are also supporting the youth?
I have found that when we transition to virtual programming, my communication and connection with families probably quadrupled. So whereas before, and directly with families, whereas before, you know, I would typically leave that up to classroom teachers. Now I was really connecting with families via email, had their phone numbers, we did a survey. So we had like people sign up for slots because I tried to keep the groups to no more than 4 because of the sound issue. And so that I can engage with children individually. So in order to sign up for a slot, they had to fill out like a survey and a questionnaire. So we talked about what was their preferred communication method. So if that was text message, like they gave me their cell phone, I would text them, which meant that I was doing, some people I was calling, some people I was emailing, some people I was text messaging. The other thing that I found myself doing was getting on early. I was always on the call about 15 minutes early in case parents or guiding adults wanted to talk to me. And I frequently would stay after and talk to guiding adults and just ask them how things were going, what was going on, and really connected and took the time to build relationship with the guiding adults in the child's life. That is something that you need to kind of think through and plan though, because like Emma just said, that affects time. So that's going to affect your time in being able to just jump from program to program.
And to add to the web, usually your local representatives will have a comprehensive list of resources in your neighborhood that are serving kids, whether it's, again, the food at the libraries or mental health services or the physical health and well-being needs. You don't have to do all that research yourself. There are comprehensive lists for each neighborhood in the Cleveland area or for your town. So you can reach out to your local representative or to local community-based organizations that serve the whole community, and they tend to have really nice lists of supports.
My organization also has some contacts with some people that have done this work and done this research that have like Google documents that like lists food pickup sites and everything that I'm happy to share out. If anybody wants to email me, I'm happy to share that out as well.
All right, thank you everybody for your thoughtful questions, for joining us, to Leah and Alicia for presenting. I will send this video recording out as well as the slides and the PDF and some of the links and resources that Leah and Alicia both spoke on today. Again, feel free to reach out with questions. I can connect you personally with either one of them or on the call last week with our other presenters. But thank you for your time, and hopefully everyone learned a little bit more about trauma-informed care. Have a great day, everybody.